listening to the Patriot Nation podcast.
All right, welcome into another edition of the Patriot Nation podcast. As always, a proud member of the CLNS group of podcasts. Make sure you download and subscribe to all of those great shows over there for great Patriots content all week long. But as I said tonight, it's the Pats Nation Network here with your boy Pat Lane, my guy Matt St. Jean, and Matt, the Patriots in the AFC Championship Game once again. All is right with the world. The Patriots are good. The Jets and Dolphins still suck. The Bills are in turmoil. Life is good. Life is good.
Just the side-by-side of like the Patriots preparing for the AFC Championship while the Bills owner decides he wants to stick, not just his foot in his mouth, but apparently his entire leg.
It's insane.
It's incredible. This is what you live for as a Patriots fan. And it's a reminder, we have talked on here about the Patriots ownership situation and how it is not always perfect. So you look around the AFC East right now, and it's pretty clear that Robert Kraft is the best owner in the division.
Yeah.
And that's not why we're winning, but it's why the other franchises have been what they've been for so long.
Right. It's wild. Wild. Also, we got a new member of the chat, Kyle. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you.
Welcome,
thanks
Kyle.
for being here. Look, the Keon Coleman stuff is hysterical. Now, Keon Coleman is a bust. He's not good. But we can all agree on that. I also think they're not really using him the way they should be. Like, he should be a big slot guy, and they're not using him that way. Whether that would make a difference or not, I don't know. But what's absolutely wild to me, and it's so funny, like, I don't know if you follow Benchwarmer brand, but he does like the videos where he pretends to be like all different players or all different people or whatever. And anyways, he has some funny videos, but it's like Sean McDermott gets fired and he's like, I saw that coming. And then it's like Brandon Beane. And he's like, you're terrible at your job. You've drafted 2 Pro Bowlers since you took over, or since Josh Allen was drafted, blah, 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 the whole nine. And he's like, well, I know I suck at my job, but what if you promoted me? And they're like, well, why would we do that? And he's like, well, what if I don't suck at this job? And it's just like, it's insane. And like, there's no explanation for him getting promoted.
Well, there is. It's just not a football explanation.
Well, and that's ultimately what it comes down to, right? Is that like anyone that looks at the situation can look at it and say, okay, maybe the voice in the room is stale, but clearly we haven't taken the right steps to put pieces around Josh. Right. James Cook, fantastic player, right? They have a few pieces on the offensive line, but they haven't hit the right guys at wide receiver. The Patriots are in the AFC Championship Game with 2 guys that were wide receivers for the Bills in recent memory, right? 2 years ago. Like, they played together in Buffalo. Last year, Mac Hollins, like, do you think Mac Hollins would walk in? He'd be the best receiver in the Bills locker room. Like, it's insane. And that's the stuff where it's like, it's inexcusable to let those things happen. And then Brandon Cooks is your best player at the wide receiver position. And it's like, how did you even let that happen? He's a guy that didn't even start the year on the team.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the Bills have had a real rough luck situation at receiver with injuries. They had 2 different guys tear their ACLs in the wild card round. So it puts you in a tough spot than you should be. There's not a lot of rosters that can withstand losing that many players, and Josh Palmer too. But like, this is the big issue, is that you drafted a wide receiver in the first round to fix the problem, and he didn't fix the problem.
Right.
And you did that with kicking Diggs out of the building and getting rid of Mac Hollins, and you put the whole picture together, and it's, obviously there's been bad luck. It's the GM's responsibility to make sure your roster can withstand some bad luck. That's part of the gig. I went back and I was listening to some of the post-game pods, just catching up on some of the episodes I hadn't listened to yesterday. And it was funny to hear the reactions after the Bills-Broncos game, because immediately there were people saying like, all right, I think heads might roll after this just because of the situation. And if someone goes, like, it should clearly be Brandon Beane, because McDermott's actually done a really good coaching job with the group that he's been given here. And, the roster's not good. It's not a bad roster. It's not a total failure, but it's just like they just keep hitting on guys that are like B- players. And it's like the Patriots have had runs like this where it feels like the best players you're getting are B-. You just can't get out of it. Like, you just can't get anyone that breaks through that. That's
Right.
and the Bills are stuck in that spot right now outside of the quarterback.
100%. And by the way, one of the guys that tore their ACL was Gabe Davis, who the Bills signed in September. And it was coming of a huge injury, which is one of the reasons why Jacksonville let him go in the first place after signing him to a big deal. So it's just like that's not like it's not like, oh, our wide receiver room was stacked and we were ready to go. It's like, no, he was on your practice squad, for God's sakes, at the start of the year. So you go into the year with a negligent, view of what your team's going to look like. And it's wild to me.
I don't think, like, Khalil Shakir, I think, is a good player.
Yes.
He's a number 2 in the NFL, but he's a good player.
I agree. Yeah.
And like the way the room was supposed to be built at the start of the year was Shakir, Josh Palmer, and Keon Coleman. That was the idea.
Right.
The problem in there is that Palmer has been hurt for long stretches of the season, and Keon Coleman just isn't that good right now. And I think they had internal suspensions with him a number of times because it's just not like it hasn't worked from a culture perspective either, which is almost more damning than his play on the field at this point. And you put that all together, it's like, all right, well, 2/3 of your plan at receiver hasn't worked out. I like, from that perspective, like, bringing in Brandon Cooks is a great signing to try to maximize that. You just shouldn't be in that spot in the first place. And then I think we talk about the offense, or specifically the receiver group. Like, you look around the rest of this, the offensive line is probably the strength of the team that is not named Josh Allen. They got 2 starters hitting free agency, I believe, and they don't have the cap space to re-sign another one, I don't think. So your strength of the team is going to get gutted here, which, side note, if you're a Patriots fan and you are looking to move Jared Wilson to center and slot in a guard, David Edwards, come on down. I think that makes a ton of sense for both sides there. But like, if that's where you're at, and then defensively, how many of these guys have they missed on right now? Cole Bishop is like just a guy. AJ Epinesa is fine. Rousseau is fine. But the defense is just filled with a whole bunch of these guys who are B-. And when you try to make a defense where the best players are guys that aren't difference makers, you're going to have a hard time. And you look at that defense this year, and it's fine. They can't defend the run at all, and that was a big issue for them all year long, which ends up coming back to haunt them against a Denver team that isn't particularly great, we don't think. And you turn the ball over 5 times and you're still in the game. Like, it's even with all of this, like, you still have Josh Allen. You should still be able to make this work. And I don't know. I thought for the reactions after the game, I think it was evident to me that there's a cultural issue there and that McDermott needed to go, not because McDermott's a bad coach, but because you need a reset in terms of leadership in the locker room.
Correct.
But I think if you just look at the guys who are out there on the field, you can't convince me that Brandon Beane is the best man to be GM. And I don't even think he's necessarily a bad GM, but at least I didn't think that a week ago. I think he's gotten some bad luck. But your job is to put your job is to put a championship team on the field. And they've swung and missed a lot, and I think it's time for a new voice. So the fact that he has, managed to get in the owner's ear, convince ownership that everyone else is the problem, and then have the owner publicly lambast people is just, spineless from the GM's perspective to let that happen and to throw everyone else under the bus the way you're doing it. And from a Patriots perspective, if this is they're probably just going to go into another cycle of this, and I'm sure they're going to be good because they have Josh Allen, but I have no confidence they're ever going to be more than just good for the next 2-3 years here.
Correct. Yeah, which is great. By the way, Nikhil with a great comment here. Mr. Bean would be a better GM than Brandon Beane. But look, the fact of the matter is that you have Josh Allen. If you have Josh Allen, you have to be a competitive / championship team. You have to, because he's that good. Is he going to have terrible games where he does stupid things? Absolutely. But then is he going to make up for it for driving you down the field and tying the game? Probably. Yeah. So it's one of those things where like you live with the bad because the good can be so good. And, there was a lot of bad in that Denver game. But ultimately, he did enough to win. Most of these playoff games that they're losing is because they're allowing the other team to score 27 to even 40 points almost, right? So that's the difficult part if you're a Bills fan. And look, if it were me, I think it makes sense to fire Sean McDermott. I just think you needed, a new voice in there, and it had clearly gotten stale. It wasn't working. It's time to move on. I think really after the 13 seconds game, that could have been the time.
Looking back, that's kind of because it feels like the team's been trying to win that game ever since. Yeah. And it seems like every time they don't, things get a little bit tighter.
Right.
And that's not helping. And so I think, with the benefit of hindsight, you'd say you probably can McDermott after that and just look for something fresh the next year.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously it's one of those like freak things that no, like 1 out of a million teams wins that game. Right. And just so happened it was the Chiefs that won that game. Just like, in 2016 when the Patriots came back 28-3, like it's just, what are you going to do? Like you have this great lead and you have this great game and whatever, and then you end up losing in the end. But yeah, I can't say I'm sorry to see it. I also think we talked about it on here, I believe, right afterwards, but it wasn't right afterwards, obviously, but clearly an interception, the Brandon Cooks play. Yeah. Clearly an interception. People are talking about it like they know what they're talking about. There's been dozens of instances where plays like that, just like that, have happened, and they're either incomplete or intercepted. And it's just I'm sorry, him touching the ground doesn't constitute him catching the ball. That's just not how it works.
It's not the end of the play there. And it's the way they've always interpreted that is if you're going to the ground, basically you have to hold on to the ball long enough that you could have stood up with it. Like that's generally how they view that.
And so what's interesting about it is that they got rid of the term survive the ground. Yes. But what they didn't get, what they changed it to instead was to make a play common to the game of football. If you're falling down, that essentially means that you hold onto the ball through the fall to the ground. Mm-hmm. The reason why they didn't want to say survive the ground is because there's different interpretations that could have happened. I think, like, for instance, the Dez Bryant play, I think would probably be ruled a catch in the new interpretation of the rule. The Heath Miller, I think it was for the Steelers. You could now maybe call those catches because they're
Jesse James play.
Jesse James. Sorry, I knew it was one of the tight ends.
Going back like an extra decade there.
Yeah, sorry about that. So showing my age there with Heath Miller, but it's one of those things where it's like, because the both feet are on the ground, because he stretches the ball out, it's like, okay, surviving the ground isn't as important because he's already made a football move. If you're just catching it and falling, you have to survive the ground because that's the football move. That's the move. You go to the ground, survive the ground. You lose it during that. That's it. You lost the ball and you didn't complete the act.
Well, and that's like, if you just think about it a little bit more abstractly too, what the rules are basically telling you is it's a three-step thing. You have to have the ball. That's the first thing.
Correct.
You have control of it. You have to do it in the playing surface, which is where the 2 feet thing comes from. And then after those two, you got to do a third thing, which generally summed up is do something with the football so you can prove that you actually have possession of the ball well enough that you can do things with the football, whether that's advance it or hold it for a really long time or reach it out or, put both arms over it. Or there's a million other things, which is why they just say enact common to the game. because it is going to be always nebulous and subjective, and there's no way to get around that unless we wanted to add like a clock and say if you hold the ball for 1.5 seconds, it's a catch,
Right.
which I think is ridiculous
Stupid.
in its own way.
Yeah.
And it's very like by the rules and the way they've always been interpreted, not a catch, very clearly an interception. And the fact that there's still the thing that gets me about this entire thing is for the owner to admit in the presser that they fired Sean McDermott because of the results of the game, and also that they believe they only lost the game because of a bad call.
Right.
So you are admitting publicly that you are firing your head coach because of something that he has no control over.
Right. It's insane. It's insane. It's bad ownership.
When it definitely sounds like they're going to hire Brian Daboll next, and it just seems like you're setting up this thing where it's like, all right, it's a GM who's only there because the owner likes him, and he's clearly being told things that the owner wants to hear, and they're going to bring in the coach that Josh is comfortable with. And it just seems like you're setting up an entire organization where every hiring decision is being made about like the comfort of the people around him.
Right.
And that's great in April. Does that help you win football games in November and December and January? No.
Right.
And long-term sustainability? No. You need people that can push each other and challenge each other. Otherwise, you're not going to win.
Yeah. One other thing. Well, this is a good point here. Vance Joseph here said today that they knew that the receiver had trouble finishing catches, so to go after the ball. And it's a great point. And I just and here's the thing for me, right? And it's the simplest thing. Forget about the interpretation of the rule. Forget about the letter of the law. Forget about how everything's written. The two players go to the ground. What happens? The defender comes up with the ball. There's not a wrestle for the ball. They're not jostling over it. They're not fighting over it. No one rips it. The two guys go to the ground. The defender comes out with the ball. That it's instant. It's not like, even the Marcus Jones one, and I do think the Marcus Jones one was an interception, but even the Marcus Jones one, they're still jostling a little bit at the end. There's no jostling here. It's like
he just takes it away.
They land on the ground. The defender has the ball. It's an interception. Like it just, sometimes it's just like, just watch the play and see what happens. Oh, the guy comes with the ball. It's got to be an interception. There's no other explanation. Right.
Yep. Well, and it's like we say the act common to the game, and you go back to what I was saying, like basically it meaning something that you can prove you actually have the ball. If
Right.
you have the ball well enough that you can fight off a defender trying to take it from you, well, you've proven you have the ball. Brandon Cooks didn't do that. He proved definitively that he did not have possession of the football. I don't know how more conclusive you can get than that someone else was able to very easily pull the ball away from him.
Well, and I think that's the other part of it is that even if, as they roll over, even if Cooks and him are still fighting for the ball and then he comes out with it, I think then they give that catch to Cooks because they do give the tie to the offensive player. If him and Cooks are fighting as they're rolling over, it's a catch. But because there's no fighting going on, Cooks has already lost the ball. There's no other way to look at it other than an interception. And I know Bills fans aren't going to see it that way. They're never going to see it that way. And that's okay. But deep down, in places they don't like to talk about at dinner parties, good throwback to A Few Good Men, which I watched the other day. They know it's an interception, not completion. They know. They know. They're not stupid. They know that. It is what it is. And so, anyways, let's get the hell away from the Bills because I enjoy reveling in the Bills tragedy, but we got to move on to some good stuff.
We're trying to win a Super Bowl here, so I think the more we talk about the Bills, the more that stink we get on us.
Agreed. So, this Patriots thing. Here's what I'm going to say at the beginning. The beginning of our preview, I'm going to start it this way, and I'm going to say definitively, Jarrett Stidham cannot beat Drake May in a playoff game. However, that's not what's happening on Sunday. It's not Jarrett Stidham versus Drake May. If it becomes Jarrett Stidham versus Drake May, the Patriots win.
Yes.
That's their path to victory, right? But that's not the case, right? The Broncos have a phenomenal defense. Now, they hadn't turned the ball over a ton, but they did on Sunday, which is their most recent game. And now it's playoff football. So, like, maybe they've turned it up a notch for playoff football. The Patriots have turned up their defense a notch for playoff football. Maybe the Broncos did on theirs. So, if they can turn the ball over for the Patriots, if they can get the run game going, listen, if Jarrett Stidham has to make 3 throws, I think he can do that. He's not a great quarterback, but if you ask him to make 2 or 3 plays, he can probably make 2 or 3 plays. If you're asking him to make 10 or 15 plays, I don't believe that he can do that. And so that's what it's going to have to be. Can you force the Broncos into relying on Jarrett Stidham to win the game? And if that's the case, the Patriots will win. If you can't do that, the Patriots could absolutely lose this game. One thing I saw, the Broncos have the most players in the Pro Bowl and the most starters in the Pro Bowl. They have 6 players going to the Pro Bowl, and 5 of them are starting in the Pro Bowl. Again, they may not actually go to the Pro Bowl because it's next week, but nevertheless, all 6 of those guys are playing on Sunday. So they may have lost Bo Nix. Bo Nix is far, far from their best player. So there's still going to be a tall task here. They're still a very good team. And there's a lot of ways that Denver can beat you, not just with the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good roster all over the place. There's a reason that the Broncos got where they are, a reason why they won this many games this year, and a certain element of that is luck. This offense, even with Bo Nix, was not fantastic during the regular season, and they're not going to have Bo Nix, obviously, for the AFC Championship. This defense can win games for you single-handedly, and that's, I think, going to be the big concern. But I have a big kind of key to the game I want to lead off with. Before I get into that, though, Pat, one thing I think we actually might have to talk about for this game real quick is the weather. Because when we did our post-game show on Sunday, the weather forecast in Denver was like 50 degrees and sunny. I've got the National Weather Service pulled up right now, and their forecast for Sunday is a high of 23 degrees in Denver now, with now a chance of snow.
Okay.
So we might get some bad weather for this one. It's definitely going to be a cold weather game. I don't know how that impacts it. I don't know how that impacts either team. And Denver hasn't really played a lot of cold weather games, especially at home. It's been a very temperate winter in Denver this year. So this is going to be the first real cold weather game in Mile High this football season. And we're going to get something I don't think we were expecting when we found out this matchup last Sunday. So that'll be something to watch over the next 48 hours here.
So I will tell you, I'm looking at just Apple on my phone, and at 2:00, it will be 2:00 Denver time. At 2:00 Denver time, it says that it will be partly cloudy and 21 degrees out. So very cold. And then by the end of the game, it'll be in like the teens.
Yep.
And so it's going to be chilly. It's going to be chilly. And, I think for the most part, for the feels like temperature, you're talking about feels like in the teens the whole game. So it's going to be cold out. Again, does that benefit the Patriots? We don't know. Does that benefit Denver? We don't know. But it is something worth watching. I'm actually kind of happy that it's not in the 50s because, who knows? How does Jarrett Stidham play in the cold? We don't know. How does Jarrett Stidham play, period? We don't know, right?
Yeah.
I still believed in Jarrett Stidham. I actually believe that the Patriots wanted to play Jarrett Stidham, and then when Cam was so cheap, they were like, fine, we'll take Cam Newton instead. But, obviously McDaniels believed in Stidham. He traded for him when he was the head coach of the Raiders. So, the Patriots are interestingly aligned enough where they understand a lot about who Jarrett Stidham is. Yeah. And so I think that they, which should be, a positive for them.
I will say, I think, the Patriots being favored in this game, when you look at the quarterback situation, I think most people are going to say the Patriots are the better team. They're going to have the better team on Sunday.
Yep.
When you're expected to have the better team, weird things happening with the weather is probably not what you want to happen. I think if this turns into a straight quarterback versus quarterback matchup, and it's 50 degrees and the weather is great and it's sunny and all that, I think Drake May is beating Jarrett Stidham, and you're really not that concerned about it. The second you add inclement weather and, if there's wind, if there's snow, it's just introducing more variables, which can cause things to go any direction. And more volatility works against you if you are favored. So we'll see how that goes. But I want to get into my keys here to the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Patriots need to win the line of scrimmage in the running game, in particular, on both sides of the ball.
On both sides.
When Denver has the ball, if you are able, and this is not a great running game, it's not a bad one, but it's not a great one. The strength of this offensive line is pass blocking, although they do have Quinn Miners, who's a real mauler at right guard in the run game. And they might have J.K. Dobbins back. So they might have their 1-2 punch at running back this week. You would expect with a young quarterback who's making his first playoff start here, you're going to try to lean on the running game. You want to make things easy for him. If you're New England, you want to take that away. Your goal is to force Jarrett Stidham to beat you. If Jarrett Stidham beats you, he beats you. But you want to make him have to do that.
Correct.
And if you want to make things complex for him, if you want to make things difficult with him, you want to get him into second and long. You want to get him into third and long. And he's a quarterback who, in his limited NFL experience, is someone who will take sacks. So if you can get him into those situations, I think you're going to like the way your defense is going to perform. Offensively, this Denver front is light, and their strength is their pass defense. If you can go heavy and run the ball on them successfully, you might not need a lot of Drake May on Sunday, especially if you're able to get an early lead behind the running game and make Denver's offense one-dimensional and force them to pass. You're probably in a good spot where you're going to force turnovers, you're going to have short fields, and you can just run. And, you might be able to win this game with Drake May having fewer than 200 passing yards and just coast right into the Super Bowl. And I think that, in some ways, is your ideal here. Pound the ball, take the air out of it, and just try to dominate this one in the trenches.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think also, too, and Nikhil mentioned it, like, one of the things that the Broncos have struggled with at times is running quarterbacks. I think that Drake needs to be part of your running game as well. Not a huge part, because you don't want him getting hurt either. But at the same time, it's the AFC Championship game. Like, we just got to win the damn game, right? Obviously, we don't want Drake May to get hurt, but, like, we got to win. So if that means that, Drake's got to run it a few more times than normal, fine. That's fine. Just get us to the Super Bowl. And so I think the big one for me is the ground game. Again, really on both sides of the football. But I think defensively, if you can stop their rushing attack, I just don't believe that they can beat you. And then from an offensive perspective, and look, Will Campbell has struggled the last 2 games. Jared Wilson has struggled the last 2 games. So what does that mean? That means that they're going against elite players right now. Allen's one of the best defensive tackles in the entire NFL. Nick Bonino is having a phenomenal year at edge. And so you start looking at it and saying, okay, well, if those guys can pin their ears back and come after you, they might have some difficulty, right? And so what's the best way to deal with that difficulty? The best way to deal with that difficulty is to be able to run the football. And now those guys are tired because you're running it down their throat. And next thing you know, you throw in a play action fake. Everyone's selling out for the run because you've been successful with it. And now guys are open. And so that's the type of stuff for me that, like, yeah, that's the path of success for the Patriots. Do I think that Drake May could sit back and throw it 40 times and beat the Broncos if he has to? I think there's a chance that he could. I also rather not find out. There's no reason to do that. For me, I just think that you have to be able to stop this run. And, Vegan kind of says it here, like, J.K. Dobbins, I think, is probably going to play, but, like, I don't know what percentage he's at. Is he at 50%? Is he at 60%? He didn't play last week. So if he goes out there and tries to play, what's that going to look like? And RJ Harvey, I think, is one of their good weapons there. Like, how is he going to be running the ball? He's a rookie as well. And so, whatever. We saw Travion kind of struggle the last 2 weeks. So I'm just interested. I'm interested to see what happens if we can stop that running game. I think then it really flips in our favor, where you say, okay, Stiddy, beat us. And if you're able to confuse them a few times, it only takes a few. able to confuse him a few times, and he makes a bad throw here, takes a sack he shouldn't, and it turns into a fumble, and so on and so forth. And so, that to me is what I look at and just say, yeah, stop the run, and it's going to be awfully difficult for Denver to beat you unless you give them the game with turnovers.
Yeah, and you talk about giving them the game with turnovers. I think this is one area where the running game is important as well, because Vance Joseph, defensive coordinator there in Denver, the way they like to play. So we just saw Houston, like the Texans run a simple defense. It's going to be 4-man fronts, 2 linebackers, 5 defensive backs. They're playing cover 4, cover 3, or cover 1, 4-man rush. Like that's what they're doing the entire game. You know exactly what's going on. Broncos are probably going to run a lot of 5-man fronts. So they're going to bring an extra guy down. And out of those looks, they'll throw a lot of different things at you. They'll do simulated pressures. They're going to do all-out blitzes. They're going to do overload blitzes. They're going to do drop 8. They're going to mix things up. They're going to put 5 guys on the line of scrimmage, and you don't know which of those 5, how many of those 5 are coming. If you want to get them out of those exotic looks, run the ball.
Right.
That's the key, because it's a lot tougher to live in those looks if a lot of those looks are not sound against the run because they're not designed to be, and you can only call them on 2nd and long and 3rd and long. If you can stay ahead of schedule and stay ahead of the chains, it's just fewer opportunities for that pass rush to get you. And this is a Denver defense didn't force a lot of turnovers this year, but I think they led the NFL in sacks. They have 4 different pass rushers who had at least 7 sacks this year, which, Nick Bonito is the guy who gets the love. He's the guy at the top of that list with 14 sacks this year. Jonathan Cooper had 8. John Franklin Myers, a name you might know from his time with the Jets, had 7.5. And Zach Allen had 7. Zach Allen, someone who is first-team All-Pro this year. I think number 99 there, who will be probably lined up over Jared Wilson right next to Nick Bonito. So if you want to, these guys are all undersized. So if you want to take them out of the game, I think you go 6 offensive linemen and just pound the rock, make them put extra linebackers on the field, and settle out to defend the run. I really do think that's the best game plan.
Yeah, and if you can do that, then you also can hit them with the play action fake. If you're successful running the football, that keeps them guessing. Now we hit them with a play action, and there's someone wide open. And people have kind of pointed a lot of things out. And one of the, Dan Orlovsky was talking about, how they have trouble with bunches at times, and in motion and talking with motion. Right, the McCole Hardman touchdown. I mean, that he was the only one on that side of the field. And they're at the 2-yard line. Like, how's that even happen? Because he comes in motion, and they just are shifting the coverage. And he just comes back to where he was, and no one's ready for it. And so, that's the type of stuff where it's like, if you can get them in conflict and you can get them thinking and guessing you're going to do one thing and they do another, that's when you can have some real success. And, and Pat Sat says, Kyle Williams deep on Riley Moss, maybe some DPI. I believe they were the most penalized defense in the NFL this year. They just are. Matter of fact, what's funny is that I believe I read that they were also the most penalized defense in 2015 as well, when they were that dominant.
At least on the back end. That might be just secondary specific.
Maybe just secondary. Yeah. But either way, it's like, yeah, we're going to hold the hell out of you, and we're going to hit you, and we're going to do all that stuff. Like, I just, it's interesting.
Well, and I went back. I was rewatching some old Broncos games this week just to get a feel for it. And I was watching the Giants Broncos game just because you have the massive Denver comeback in that. And I was kind of like, all right, I wanted to see what drove the comeback and how do they get that hole.
Mm-hmm.
How does Denver get in that hole against the New York Giants at home? That was I think it was 26-8 or something like that.
It was something crazy. Yeah.
The answer's a ton of penalties on defense that gave up first downs and 15-yard penalties and, spot pass interference penalties, that kinds of stuff. And then players making individual plays. Like this Denver defense, they play a lot of man coverage and they play a lot of match zone. There's not a lot of spot drop. So basically everything they play is going to have man principles, which in essence means that anytime they're in coverage, no matter what, it will turn into man. It will turn into one person on like one guy across the field, which means if you can extend the play as a quarterback, more time for your receivers to try to win down the field and shake someone and get open, or defenders with their backs turned and the quarterback's going to be able to scramble. So in those spots where you have to pass, it's going to be May making plays with his legs, and it's going to be your receivers having to make plays. Jacksonville goes up to Denver with that big win late in the season. Half of that was on the back of Parker Washington, who just made play after play after play as a receiver. So I look at I don't think Stephon Diggs is going to have a big game, probably because he's going to have Pat Surtain on him, and Pat Surtain's one of the best in the business, and that's fine. I want Kayshon Boutte and Riley Moss. Boutte is a physical receiver, and Riley Moss will answer that physicality with enough physicality that it's going to get a flag throw.
Right.
So go after him with that matchup, and then target the middle of the field like Hunter Henry. If Mac Hollins, who practiced today, is able to go in this one, I think he'd be super valuable as someone who can win at the catch point and make plays versus defensive backs. And Pop Douglas has someone who, if you're trying to cover Pop Douglas in man coverage for 5 seconds while May is extending a play, you're going to have a hard time with that. And he's someone who can make plays down the field. And if you can just put all that together with a little bit from the running game, that's how you win in the passing game, those things. And then the comeback for the Broncos, so much of it was Bo Nix running and scrambling. I think he's one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL for how often he throws on the run. And the go-ahead touchdown that puts Denver ahead for the first time in that game is I believe a Bo Nix designed run from like 15, 20 yards out that he just takes in for a score. Stidham's not really doing that stuff. So, that's the element that's going to be missing if they do have to try to put together a comeback.
Yeah. And that's the big thing for me in that Giants game you're talking about. They were up 19-0 in the third quarter, right? The Broncos scored 33 points in the fourth quarter alone. They won the game 33-32. So they were shut out going into that. And, they had two huge plays. I think there was one that was like 25 and then one that was like over 20 yards on that last drive because the Giants scored a touchdown with like 35 seconds left. Yeah. So, that's one of those situations where it's like you can't lose that game. If the Patriots are up 20-0 on them on Sunday, it's going to be difficult for them to come back without their starting quarterback. And I think that it's a situation where they're not ready to give up. I'm not saying that, but there's all the excuses for them to give up. If you jump out to a big lead on them and they don't have their starting quarterback and their offense is sputtering, I think there's a chance that you can just jump on them and choke them out for lack of a better term, and just take them away. Because, and Zoe kind of talked about the switch that was really interesting, is that Zolak was talking about how like Stidham just hasn't done it in a while. He's been a scout team quarterback, that's fine, but when you have the coach talking in your ear about, hey, we got to do this, and the personnel is different, and then that guy's down, and then what defense are they running, and then I got to get to the line, and I got to check the protection, and I got to do all this. And then, okay, this guy came from over here, and what's this guy's tendencies over there, and where am I going to throw it? And then, and all that stuff happens. And then you come off the sideline, and you're looking at your Mac Pro, and then, Peyton comes over and is talking to you, and you're talking about, okay, we got to make this play and that play. And then the next time you're looking, and all that stuff just snowballs for you. And if it starts going bad, and if it's not working, I think that's really challenging, right? For a guy that hasn't done it in multiple years, right? And again, there's been one quarterback that didn't throw a pass in 2024. And there was one quarterback that didn't throw a pass in 2025.
That played in a game,
one QB2, one backup quarterback that didn't throw a pass in 2025, and one backup quarterback that didn't throw a pass in 2024. And they're both named Jarrett Stidham. So he hasn't thrown a pass in the NFL for 2 years. And it's like he's been the backup, and he's a valuable backup, but like, I don't know. And Vegan's kind of asking this same thing, right? Is it realistic for him to come in and play well at real game speed? And I think, practice speed is there, and he's been working against the number one unit. And I think that helps that he's working against the number one unit in practice. But I just don't see that. I don't see it as, all right, it's practice. It's not the same as the game, man. It's not. And so, like AI would say, we're talking about practice. It's just not, it's not the game,
Well, and I think you look at this Denver offense with Bo Nix, and so much of the offense is predicated on having an athletic quarterback and one who can throw underneath consistently. Like it's a lot of RPO where you got a QB run threat involved. There's a ton of bootleg. You've got designed quarterback, like just straight quarterback runs, like the play that he gets hurt on in the divisional round. Like that's a pretty common part of their playbook. And I have to think a lot of that's just gone with Stidham. And now you're asking him without that threat, because this was a high volume pass offense this year. They prefer to throw the ball. And it's a lot of dink and dunk with some intermediate stuff thrown in, not as much deep stuff. You're going to ask a backup quarterback to come in and hit live routes on time with receivers he has not regularly been working with because he's been on the scout team. Like, he's not throwing to these guys every day for the last 3 years that he's been there. You're asking him to make those throws consistently in tight windows time and time again. I think the Broncos can score 17 points in this game off of just offense because Sean Payton's good at what he does, and he's a good coach. I'm sure they're going to have some stuff. I'm sure there's going to be some trickery and things that we have not seen before.
Yeah,
I think that gets you to 17, and anything past that, it's going to be the help of the defense or the Patriots just shooting themselves in the foot some way, or someone on that Denver offense going nuclear. If Cortland Sutton just owns Christian Gonzalez somehow and dominates that matchup and you lose because of it, then that's one of those where you just got to tip your cap and all right, we're on to next season.
Right.
It would take something like that, I think, for them to exceed that. So I think that's also what the ball control comes in for New England's offense, because if you get to 3 touchdowns, I think you're winning the game.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is just like the last couple of weeks. It's funny. This entire season has been Drake May. The quarterback turnaround, the offense is here. Yeah, the defense also exists.
Right.
And you get into the playoffs and just the way that this is because it's been a defensive run of teams you're playing, it's consistently, can the offense make a couple plays to break through the defense, and then our defense will take over. And I think this is really probably another example of that. It's going to be a different looking type of game than the last two, which were also different from one another. I think it's going to appear different because of the coaching styles involved.
Right.
But I think the core themes are generally the same there.
I agree. I do have a take about the Patriots defense, but I will get into that. We're going to take a quick ad break, and I'll get into that after the ad break. This ad break, of course, is for Prize Picks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to cash in during America's biggest sporting event than Prize Picks, where it always feels good to be right. And since the big game is right around the corner, that also means it's your last chance to get into the football action before next season. So close the season outright with Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. Remember, you can find your community on Prize Picks with the new social feeds feature. You can share Prize Picks with your friends and copy lineups from winners with a single click. Copy lineups you like or use them as inspiration for your own picks. You can even follow Prize Picks partners like us and tail or fade our picks with just one click. Some of the guys I'm looking at this week, and I haven't made my lineup just yet. I will have my lineup for Sunday, but I haven't made it just yet. Some of the guys I'm looking at are Drake May, specifically his rushing yards. I'm also looking to the other side as well, and Puka Nacua for receptions, and even maybe Kenneth Walker for rushing yards as well. But what are you going to do? Download the app Prize Picks, put in the promo code CLNS. When you do that, you're going to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNX to get, try that again, CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Okay, too much math, CLNX. It brings me back to you're not from Massachusetts, but it brings me back to ZLX, which is an old rock station from Boston. But anyways,
I'll have to ask my dad about that. I'm sure he
yes.
listened.
Oh yeah. So anyways, here's my thing about the defense. And this is one of the reasons why I'm a little leery about trusting the defense to take over and win the game. Because the Chargers had one of the worst offensive lines of football. The Texans had a not so great offensive line and then were without Trent Brown. The Broncos have, statistically, the best offensive line in football. And this is where, yes, you can get home with some blitzes, and yes, you can do some exotic things to kind of mess them up a little bit and run some games and do some stunts and things like that. It's just going to be a more difficult challenge for them. Like, this is not going to be, we're winning our one, Corey Durden's not going to be in the middle winning one-on-one battles like he was. Now, maybe he will every now and again, but he's not going to be doing it at such a consistent basis that he has been the last few weeks. And I think that that's where I get a little leery about trusting the defense too much. Yes, the defense is a huge part of this and needs to be. The Broncos' offensive line is still there. They're still intact. They're still fantastic. And so that, to me, is one of those things where it's like, if the offensive line of Denver takes over and you have a difficult time. Now, the good news for the Patriots is that arguably, obviously not their two best players, but two of their best players on defense play the defensive line and will be going head-to-head against those guys. That's helpful. I also think Anthony Jennings has been fantastic. I think Harold Landry is working his way back into form. And Caleb Vaughn Jason has looked, or as Brian Balding likes to call him, LaCavon Jason, has really been working his way back into form and has been fantastic certainly in these playoffs and in this end stretch as well. And so, I feel good about where we're at. I just wonder what it looks like now against the number 1 unit instead of the number 32 unit.
Yeah. And I think that's the big concern. The nightmare scenario when you go out there is the Broncos devise some trickery on the first possession and go up 7-0. Patriots turn it over immediately, and Denver goes up 14-0. And then from there, their offensive line is able to just kind of take the game over and not coast, but
just pound you down.
Yeah, and consistently long possessions, keeping your offense off the field, being able to commit to the running game and ground and pound you. And even if it's only getting field goals, or even if it's not getting points, but it's 5-minute drives that are stalling at the 50 and pinning you back at your own 5. That's going to be a tough place to live. So I think this is probably the toughest test you're going to face all season on the line, really. At least if you look at PFF's numbers, which I do think, you look at PFF's pass block grade stuff, it doesn't seem to take scheme into account that much. Like a lot of the line looking good, I think, is helped by moving the pocket and getting nicks to certain spots.
For sure.
So I do wonder if they look worse on Sunday when you're not necessarily going to be able to do all that. But you're not winning with a 4-man rush against this line, especially when you haven't in the last 2 weeks. It's the blitz that's been doing it for you, and it's kind of the inverse of what we talked about when the Patriots have the ball. If you want to do all the stuff that will beat Jarrett Stidham defensively, all the blitzes and all the complex stuff and trying to confuse him, you can't do any of that stuff if you're consistently in 2nd and 4 and 3rd and 1. You're going to be stuck just playing the run, and it's going to be Jelani Tavai and Anthony Jennings giving you 50 snaps, and Jack Gibbons giving you like 50 snaps out there because you're just trying to stop the run to stay afloat. And especially at high altitude where they're going to be used to it and you're not, and you might get gassed and blown off the ball a little bit. And, I get that's where I think winning the trenches in the running game is going to be so important for you, because that's the path for Denver, is to just control the pace of the game and not have to ask Jarrett Stidham to do that much.
Well, that's really what it comes down to, right? Is that if you get that nightmare scenario for the Patriots, there is a path to victory, right? That nightmare scenario for the Patriots is that the Broncos are able to do just that, hold on to the football, take some long drives, go up early on you, say not even 14, just say 7-0, maybe even 10-0, go up early on you and kind of be able to pound the football, but not really score a ton of points. The Patriots have a path to victory there, right? Even if they can't run the ball well, you feel like if the ball is in Drake May's hands, you feel pretty good about it, right? Not great, but you feel pretty good about it, even if they can't run the ball. On the flip side, Denver can't win. They can't beat you. Again, if it turns into Jarrett Stidham versus Drake May, it's just not going to happen. Denver's going to lose that matchup every single time. And so from the Patriots' perspective, as long as it's both the same, right, then you feel like the Patriots can win that game. If the Broncos dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides, you're in big trouble. And that's where you can lose the game. And again, this is the situation. I think Denver's roster is more talented than the Patriots roster. I think they have more talent across the field, just overall talent. And so can those guys just step up and be better? Yeah, maybe. And that's the situation, right? And so it's one of those things where I look at it and just say they have a clear path to victory here, right? The Broncos do. If you can beat them at those things, I just don't know how they win. I just don't know how they win. If you can stop their run and don't turn the ball over a bunch, I don't see how the Broncos possibly beat you if that's the case. Even if they do a good job at rushing the passer and they make life difficult for Drake May, I just don't see how the Broncos win if they can't effectively run the football.
Yep. Well, I do think you look back at the context of this team. We'll go back because their bye week was right before Thanksgiving. The games they've played then. A game at Washington with Mariota playing that they end up winning in overtime by 1 point because Nick Bonito makes an awesome play on a 2-point conversion. And
yeah,
granted, if this game comes down to one play, you might lose that because Nick Bonito is going to make a play.
Right.
But the fact that they're in a game that close with Washington, granted on the road, but against Marcus Mariota, where they allowed 419 yards of offense in that one, I think is telling, including 143 yards on the ground. A win at Vegas, which ends up being by one score, but functionally they were up by like 3 scores until 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter. The Raiders tacked on a couple late, so I don't count that. But a win at home by 1 score against a Green Bay team that I believe lost Micah Parsons during that game.
I think you're right.
Yep.
I think that was the Parsons one. Yeah.
Yep. A blowout home loss to the Jaguars, a game where you're down 34-17 in the fourth quarter, ends 34-20. A 1-score win at Kansas City with Chris Oladukin or Oludukon. I'm not entirely sure how you say that. Starting
Oladukin's so much more fun. That's the way we're saying it.
It is. A win at home against a Chargers team that wasn't trying, was starting Trey Lance. And a win in overtime against a Bills team that turned the ball over 5 times and had every single player in the receiving core that was notable except for Khalil Shakir get injured.
Right.
So this is not a Denver team that has exactly covered itself in glory down the stretch. And I do think they aren't as good as the record. They were incredibly fortunate in 1-score games all year long. They made plays, and that's a credit to them.
Mm-hmm.
They also, in back-to-back weeks, gave up 32 points at home to the New York Giants, which, by the way, that was 5 touchdowns by the Giants with 2 missed extra points and a failed 2-point conversion in there.
That's great.
That's why the game doesn't go to overtime. And a game against the Jets over in London where they only score 13 points on that Jets defense. So you have a 13-11 win, a 32-33 win against the Jets and the Giants. Patriots blew out both of those teams this year, multiple times in the case of the Jets. I think when you look at common opponents, the common opponents I think was the seeding reason why the Broncos end up finishing ahead of the Patriots. It's because the Patriots have a loss to the Raiders, which is pretty brutal back in week 1.
Right.
outside of that, the performances that these teams have in common, the Patriots outplayed these teams. They outplayed Denver against these teams. So, and that's with Bo Nix playing. So I think we can say all the things we want about the matchups and all that stuff. And, the Broncos have great coaches and the Broncos have talent. But then you look at the actual results in the field, and they've been kind of getting by the skin of their teeth for the entire season since they started 1-2. And without Nix to engineer any kind of comeback for you for an offense that ranked 19th in points per drive, you should be able to handle that. I know we could talk about matchups and everything, and there's ways for the Broncos to beat you. You're the better team here. You should just straight up win this game.
Right. And, Vegan says the Bears are the AFC, right? Like the Bears had all these deficiencies. And, you looked at it and said, they just find a way to win these games because their quarterback puts the team on the back and says, we're winning this game. There's just so many instances of that where even that Texans game, you go back to that Texans game and they tied the game up. They went down 15-8. They tied the game up early in the fourth quarter. No one could pick up any yardage. And then Bo Nix takes them on a drive, to kick a field goal at the end of the game. And, you just think that without Bo Nix in there, those things become very difficult. And again, it's just, I'm not saying that Jarrett Stidham can't do it. I'm not saying that. But, that Texans game, and again, that Texans game is on the road. But nevertheless, that Texans game, right, that last drive is a 6-play drive with a 25-yard run by Bo Nix. Right? So, is Jarrett Stidham going to take off on a 25-yard run at the end of the game to win the game for Denver? I guess it's possible. But this is stuff that we saw Bo Nix do over and over and over and over and over again. And I don't know how you could possibly trust Jarrett Stidham to do that. And again, I do think if you ask Jarrett Stidham to make 4 or 5 passes to win you the football game in the course of the game, there's a chance that he can do that. If you put the game on his shoulders and say, we have to win this game, here you go, Jarrett, go win us the game. I don't believe that he can do that. And so if you force them to try to do that, that's where your advantage becomes. And again, that's where it becomes Drake May versus Jarrett Stidham. And if that's the case, you win. And, that's what you have to be able to do. But you have to force them to be able to do it. And look, all those other teams, you mentioned those teams stink, but they forced the Broncos to have to do that. And the Broncos ultimately came out on top. And a big part of that, just like the Bears, which is why it's a good comparison by Vegan there, is their quarterback just saying, yep, here we go. We're doing it. I don't love Bo Nix, but he just kept making plays. He's just he's a winner. He wins games. And it's hard to deny that. Without him, it's difficult. And there's always, in my opinion, all right, one guy goes down, everyone else steps up. That's definitely true. But again, if the Patriots jump out to a 10 or 14-point lead early on in the game, it's only natural for the Broncos to just be like, shit, man, if we had Bo Nix, we would have won this game, right? We believe that we would have come back with Bo. But I just don't know how we could do it with Jarrett Stidham, and that's natural for them to do. And I'm not saying they're going to do that, but that's a natural reaction for them to do. And I think that, the Patriots need to try to force them to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I also wonder here defensively, if you're New England, if you just take a page out of Denver's book. I was just kind of thinking this to myself, you want to take away the run and you want to get up in their face. I wonder if you just play a bunch of cover one man, because outside of Cortland Sutton, these receivers don't threaten you a ton. I don't think.
No.
Load the box, get 8 in the box, 5-man front, try to rush 5 often to make sure that you can try to get home and just man up across the board. And if they beat you deep, they beat you deep. But Stidham has not been a good deep passer in the NFL. He's got a big arm, but he's not necessarily accurate. Right. But if he beats you down the field, he beats you down the field. But Christian Gonzalez is elite, as especially someone who defends deep vertical routes. And Carlton Davis is physical and pretty good on those routes, and Marcus Jones is athletic. And, I think Marvin Mims is someone you worry about a little bit just because of his speed. If you're going to do that, you'll need to make sure that's probably a Marcus Jones thing. He's going to have to stick with him down the field on the 2 or 3 shot plays they end up calling. But I think when you look at the way this Denver offense plays, it's so much short underneath stuff, behind the line of scrimmage stuff. And it's even that's with Bo Nix. I mean, it's begging for you to come up and just play as aggressively as possible until they beat you over the top enough that you feel like you have to get out of it. Because if you play 4-man rush zone coverage, they're probably just going to dink and dunk you underneath and get a bunch of field goal drives out of it.
Right.
And you're not going to get pressure. So, I think you want to take the fight to them on defense and make a play. I think we'd also be remiss without mentioning special teams. I don't think there's anything like massive here, but it's probably worth noting. Like Marvin Mims is fast and a good returner. So you can't lose this game 24-20 because you give up a return touchdown.
Correct.
That can't happen. You can't lose this game by 1 point because your kicker's missing extra points. Right. We've seen that in Denver before.
Yes, we have.
Or lose by 2 in that case. You can't be doing that stuff. And I do also, go back to that Pats Giants Monday night game where you go down to get a field goal on the first drive and a Marcus Jones punt return touchdown. And, you're already up 2 scores. It kind of feels like the game is over and you can just take over. If you can get a play like that out of your special teams units, a big return for field position or a return touchdown or anything, that's going to help you so much. Because if you get to play on a short field against this defense, you'll take all the help you can get. And even if your drive stalls, if you can pin this Denver offense inside their own 10, again, you got to like where you're going to be after that.
Agreed. And Pats Nation, you mentioned him. But Pats Nation here mentions Marvin Mims, and I just think like he is a guy. He lines up all over the place. He's got a ton of speed. They like to get him the ball in multiple different ways, and he's a good returner. And so that's a guy that I'm worried about. Obviously, Cortland Sutton is their big guy. He has great games. He has games where he does nothing. As a guy who had him in fantasy this year, I can tell you he is not consistent. Now, he makes huge plays in big moments. He is a big moment guy, right? And so he certainly has that capability, but there are also times when they can't get him the ball either. And so I'm curious to see kind of what that looks like as well. And if Gonzo's on him, can he shut him down? If Carlton Davis is on him, can he shut him down? So those are the things. Patriots going to have to be physical. They're going to have to be physical on defense. And I think, your point about bringing the fight to them, I think, is important because this is not a game that I want to sit back and say, yeah, go ahead and dink and dunk us, Jarrett, because then he gets comfortable. Then he gets into a rhythm and feels like, oh, yeah, now I'm finding open guys and I'm finding open receivers. No, I want him sped up. I want him worried about where's this guy coming and who's coming here for pressure. And there's a simulated pressure and there's 6 guys up at the line of scrimmage and I'm not sure who's coming. And then 3 guys come or 4 guys come or 5 guys come or even 6 guys come. Who knows? But I don't know who's coming. And so now I'm worried about, all right, am I going to hit this slant here? Okay, I try to hit the slant, but then, Spillane looks like he's coming up the middle, but he drops down, and all of a sudden he's sitting in that zone, and I can't throw the slant. So now I got to go find the number 2, and then do I have time to get the
and now
number
you're
2?
sacked. Yeah.
Right. And that's, and those are some of those things where that's the tough part. And by the way, Pats Nation did ask about Carlton Davis. Has not cleared concussion protocol yet. He was in the red jersey again today. That bears watching. In the red jersey is good, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's there yet.
He's about where Christian Gonzalez was at this point,
But Gonzo, I believe, was only in the red jersey for 1 day of practice. It may have been Thursday, Friday, where he was in red jersey and then blue jersey, but I'm not sure.
I think it was something like that. Yeah. Well, and I think just the nature of the way the concussion protocol works is too, like, I just don't think I don't think he's going to clear it before like Saturday.
Oh no, that's definitely how it works. I just, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm curious about how that looks. Yeah. Matt Collins is another one. And Khalil asked about him. You mentioned him earlier. He was out there with no restrictions. Now, I'm not saying no restrictions. He was out there without a red no contact jersey on.
He was listed as limited.
Yes. And so he played limited, but he wasn't in the red jersey. It gives you a little bit of hope. I don't know. I'm not sure if he's going to be ready to go, to be very honest with you. If he's close to being ready to go, I think he plays. The question is, and I think that Efton Chisholm has given you some good plays out there. Maybe not necessarily receiving, but do you sit him down in favor of Mac Hollins? And Mac Hollins can kind of go out there and do the same type of thing if he's at 75%. Is 75% of Mac Hollins as good as Efton Chisholm? Probably. Right. And so that's then that becomes the question of, how good is he? How close to 100% is he? And are we good for that? And I think that Hollins will really help the passing offense a lot. And I think his run blocking will help the run game. But also, it was a core injury, right? I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that looks like for him. Will he have that strength to get in the run game and or to reach up and extend for a ball that's over his head? I'm just not sure.
If he's at 70 or 80%, you probably don't want him out there because he's not going to make the plays you're hoping he can make.
Right.
You'd rather just someone like Efton Chisholm.
Yeah.
A couple other injury notes while we're on the subject. 3 did not practices for the Patriots as of Thursday. Harold Landry is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, he has not looked good on tape. I wonder if he's ended up just being out on Sunday. I'd love to have him out there, but he just does not look healthy right now with that knee injury. And Anthony Jennings and Elijah Ponder are giving you more, and you have Braden Swinson. So I wonder if you just sit him down and see if you can get him healthy for the Super Bowl if you're playing in that, which is wild to hear those words come out of my mouth.
Right?
Yeah, that's where we're at right now. Marty Mapu not practicing with a hip injury. I would say this is sneakily important when we talk about the special team stuff because he's the personal protector, which is he's the last man of defense when you're punting the football to stop a punt from getting blocked. In a game like this where you're on the road and you might be dealing with crowd noise and it might end up being a closer game than you like, you're playing a backup quarterback, all that stuff. You don't want to lose the game because your backup personal protector is there on the punt unit and he messes something up, you get a punt blocked and goes back the other way for a touchdown. And that's the difference. So I'll be watching that. And then Garrett Bradbury popped up today with an illness and he missed practice. It doesn't massively worry me because I think Ben Brown's your next man up, and I don't think there's a massive drop-off there. But something to watch to see, where the depth is and how healthy you are on the line. And then on the more positive notes, Terrell Jennings and Joshua Farmer, both on injured reserve, both of them full participants in practice. Mm-hmm. So both of those guys now eligible to come back. Farmer gives you a little extra depth on the line if they want him. Terrell Jennings can just be your third running back where he's been good. He's missed a lot of time with a concussion, and he's finally out of the protocol for that. So happy to see that he's back. And then a couple notes for Denver. Pat Bryant, who's one of their rookie possession big slot receiver, he's in the concussion protocol, and he's still he just got upgraded to full participation. So it looks like he's going to practice, as will Luke Wattenberg, who's the starting center for Denver. He was really good this year, got injured. Backup had been playing most of the year, and the backup got hurt last week during the game. So they're going to get their original starter back this week. It looks like Bo Nix did not participate, is the only DNP. And then J.K. Dobbins and Troy Franklin, both limited participants. So we'll see if Dobbins is good to go this week. And then Troy Franklin, he's one of the speed guys. He's been a useful wide receiver for them. So if this Denver wide receiver core is going to be banged up on top of losing Bo Nix, that's something that works in your favor here.
Yeah. I mean, that's, again, you talk about the Patriots and who they're missing. And you talk about the issues that, when you look at the offensive lines they've played, right? And you say, okay, those guys aren't as good. Some injuries. Obviously, the Chargers are completely banged up because of their 2 tackles. But then missing Trent Brown for Houston last week. If their starting center's out, now you're talking about a whole nother thing. And that's That's a massively important position because of what happens from the center spot. And so again, he's probably going to play, but if he doesn't, that's something to look at. So I kind of do agree with you about Landry. I just wonder if he's just not ready. And I know he's fighting through it, but like, if you have guys that can play, Darrell Taylor is a guy that, that you pick up off the practice squad. Maybe he's ready to go, and maybe you feel better about him after a week of practice. Maybe you like Joshua Farmer back out there and you want him back out there. So those are things that I'm curious about.
When they haven't this schematically right now, they're not depending on their edges for their pass rush. Like the whole theme behind New England's pass rush right now is basically we have 2 defensive tackles that you would like to double team if you can, and we are going to put safeties and linebackers in those same gaps and threaten to bring them and sometimes bring them and sometimes not, to make sure that we're getting one-on-one matchups with the defensive tackles and or free rushers coming through some of those gaps. So if Harold Landry is just not that athletic right now, I think you're probably better off with someone else giving you 10 snaps, because you can live with Anthony Jennings, who had some good reps last week as a pass rusher.
Yeah.
But you can live with someone like that because as a pass rusher, you're asking them to you're not asking them to win with like technical pass rush moves or with a 4-man rush. A lot of it's mind games and athleticism and just being able to get to a spot. And Elijah Ponder and Anthony Jennings can do that right now. They're not like elite. I wouldn't even say they're above average right now, but they're decent and they're playable and they know the scheme. And if you got one other guy out there who's more athletic than Harold Landry is at the moment, then I think you might just, whether that's Swinson or Darrell Taylor or whoever, you probably just want to play that guy instead.
I agree with you. And Pat Stat says, Jennings got 2 sacks in the playoffs and leading the team in snaps. Leading the team in stops. I'm sorry, snaps. What am I talking about? Leading the team in stops. And that's, it's important. And I just think because of his prowess in the run game too, it makes a ton of sense. Remember, he was in the roster bubble. A lot of people thought he wasn't going to make the team. And, he is a guy that has stepped up and played well in these big moments. And so I'm happy they kept him. I was happy they kept him from the beginning, but I'm happy that it's paid off for them. Right. And so it's interesting. Now, offensive line wise, I do want to get out of here soon. I know it's almost 11:30 here, but offensive line wise, obviously there's a lot to be worried about Will Campbell and Jared Wilson. There were some questions floating around about, do you sit Will Campbell down if he can't deal with it? Do you sit Jared Wilson down if he can't deal with it? The answer to that question is a big, fat nope. Unless it's, just absolutely ridiculously bad and it's like he's just falling apart and he's a shell of himself, then maybe you consider it. I would tell you, Mike Vrabel wouldn't bench Ramondre Stevenson when he fumbled 97 times. He wouldn't bench Andres Borregales when he missed a field goal and 2 extra points in the first 2 games. He's not going to turn around and bench his, first round top 5 offensive tackle. And he's not going to bench his, rookie guard who he feels like is probably going to be the center of the future. This is not going to happen. So, is it possible that Ben Brown will be better at left guard right now? Yep. I do think that Ben Brown might be the better left guard right now. It doesn't matter. They're playing with Jared Wilson anyways, because that's the guy that got them there. That's the guy they're going to play. And it just is what it is. And Vrabel's sticking with his guys. And for better or for worse. But I think the thing for me is that what we've seen this year is his belief in those guys has been what has turned the tide for this team, in my opinion. And so I think that's huge. And Vegan mentions it. You got to give him some help. You can't leave him on an island. You just can't leave him on an island. You got to give him a little bit of help. Certainly more help than you gave him last week. He needs it. And that's okay. He's a rookie who's coming back from it, from a tough knee injury to come back from, and he came back from it early. And so that's the thing for me is like, give him a little bit more time, come out in that jumbo package, put the strong side on that side, put, Thayer Munford on that side and give him a little bit of extra help. And I think that, that's will go a long way towards helping this offensive line.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And you just you don't need an excellent game. You can't lose the game because Benito's getting 3 strip sacks type of thing. That's what you have to avoid in a situation like that. I do think this is one where you want to lean on the right side of your line, particularly like Michael Onwenu, who I criticized earlier in the year. I think it took him a little bit to settle in, but he has been excellent. Morgan Moses, like that right side is finally coming together as the run blocking unit we like, which is also coincidentally the defensive left side is the worst side for Denver, run defensively. So I do think you're just running to the right a whole bunch, and that's part of your plan to slow down Nick Bonito. Is that he's just got to play from further away. That should help you. You want to chip, I think, when you can, or whatever Will Campbell is comfortable with. Because I think he had talked about how sometimes chipping doesn't actually help him. He likes to be closer to the guy. So if instead of chipping, you're doing other things, just find a way to make that work. Yep. I do think this is an area where not being consistent with the snap count probably helps. You want to change up the timing and change up the rhythm and change up the cadence so they can't jump it. And these are the two best edge rushers in the NFL at timing up the snap. They are unbelievably quick with the way they explode off the line of scrimmage, which is your concern. No,
it's going to be silent count. You got to think, right? Which is going to be challenging.
Well, and you got to find some other ways to get there. And I got to find the article again, but there was some study that was done that talked about how one of the traits that elite quarterbacks tend to have is that they just kind of naturally vary the snap count in ways that keeps the defense off timing. And I know that's something like that wasn't something I ever consciously noticed about Tom Brady until you got to like the Mac Jones era, and the number of times where Mac Jones is snapping the ball as the rusher is, as the guy off the line is starting his rush and has timed it up perfectly, kind of brought that into focus. Oh man, like this is such an advantage when the defense can't do that to you. And May has been excellent at dummy snap, calls out a blitzer. Another dummy snap calls out a second blitzer. You did that against the Chargers on the big Ramondre Stevenson play when you're backed up in at your own goal line. Yeah. So just having that Drake May, I don't think you need MVP Drake May on Sunday. I think you need the mind of Drake May to identify things correctly pre-snap because Vance Joseph's going to try to throw a lot at you. You need a handful of big plays, and you just need the ball out on time consistently, two hands on the football when you're in the pocket or you're running with it. And try to. I think 3 or 4 big plays where you're extending and getting the ball down the field, combined with the running game, that probably puts you in a good position where you're going to end up winning this game.
100%. And Pat Stats mentioned it here, like a few sacks in exchange for beating the Texans deep is worth it, right? That same thing could be here. Like
that was the trade-off you were taking last week. I don't know if you're going to get the big plays as much. I mean, your big plays this week might be defensive pass interference penalties from Riley Moss, just target booty down the sideline.
Yeah, and you also might be able to find some. They do sometimes blow a coverage here or there. And I think that, you have to be able to take advantage of their mistakes. This is a game where if they make a mistake, you have to capitalize off of it. And so again, I think what it all boils down to is that I feel pretty good about it. Patriots are 4.5 points favorites right now as we talk. I feel pretty good about taking the Patriots with the 4.5 points. I really look at this and think if the Patriots can get out to a 10-point lead early, I think they can just salt this game away. And they may not win by 10 points, but I also see a world where they win by, more than 2 touchdowns. And, not 25 points, but, somewhere in that 14 to 17 point range because they're able to shut down that Denver run game. And you score a few touchdowns on offense early, and it's like now we got to rely on Jarrett Stidham to try to win. And I think that, that for me is a recipe for disaster if you're the Broncos. And so if the Patriots can do that, I think that they can get out to an early lead and, win this game by 14 to 17 points. If the other thing happens, I think that there's a world where things don't go right for the Patriots, and Drake May is able to lead them to a victory anyways. Again, the nightmare scenario for you is you turn the ball over a few times and you're not able to stop their running game, and Jarrett Stidham makes 1 or 2 plays in the passing game and you lose this game. And I think that's the situation where you can lose it. But when I'm looking at it and when I'm looking at the possible outcomes, there's a lot more outcomes that end in a Patriots victory than a Broncos victory. And you just have to make sure that the outcome that happens is one that you win by. And you don't have to win by 10, and you don't have to win by 14, and you don't have to cover the spread. You just got to win by 1. Doesn't matter.
One last note on this, and then we can wrap things up. You mentioned the busted coverages thing. That will happen with this kind of match coverage defense. I don't like May holding onto the ball can be a bit of an issue because he'll get strip sacked. But May extending plays against this Denver defense is one of the big ways that you beat them because they will lose guys on the back end or receivers will get open. Like Theo Johnson had like a 40-yard touchdown against them where it's just blown coverage and he's behind everyone. No one covers him, and it's an easy touchdown. Those are the kinds of things that you can do against this defense if you're able to extend the plays. So I think that is going to be massive for you. And it's just May finding – he's done it all year except for the last 2 playoff games, is finding that balance between protecting the ball in the pocket and getting the ball out quick and feeling the rush to know when you can get out and live to give the play a little bit more life for guys to win down the field. As long as you're on the right side of that balance, I think you probably end up winning this one because it's going to be tough for Denver if their defense isn't forcing those turnovers, which they haven't all year. This has not been a defense that's good at forcing turnovers this year.
Right. They're just good at rushing the passer and getting after it and shutting teams down. And that hasn't been a recipe success for them at the end of the year. Again,
it is.
A lot of those games, were won because Bo Nix kind of puts the team on his back and wins the game. And the defense kind of bows up and gets some stops at the end of the game too. But, they're giving up a good amount of points to offenses that aren't great. And so can the Patriots go in and win? It's going to be a tough atmosphere. It's going to be a tough spot to play. Remember, the Patriots haven't lost yet on the road this year. So I think they come in with some confidence about, they're going to win. We heard Kayshon Boutte, which in my opinion, and Kayshon Boutte said on Twitter, not that it matters, but he said on Twitter, he's like, I'm just saying either way, they're going to get rest. It's either 2 weeks or it's the whole offseason, right? But of course, Broncos fans are running with that, but Sean Payton comes out and says, the fans like 2 weeks of rest. They'll be fine. So I'll tell you, it's going to be fun. The stakes are high. And this is what you live for. As a Patriots fan, this is what you live for. We lived through it for a long time. Of course, we're all nervous. Of course, we put a ton of pressure on the Patriots. And I will tell you this. If the Patriots lose this game, it will suck. And it will be a disappointment. This season has been a massive success for the Patriots. A massive success for the Patriots. Here's the question I'm going to ask you. And I think maybe we can end on this. We'll see. Would you rather lose a close game in Denver or get blown out in the Super Bowl? If you had to choose.
Blown out in the Super Bowl. There's no hesitation. If it was Bo Nix, no, but it's the whole thing. Getting to the Super Bowl is the point of this thing.
Yeah.
Winning the Super Bowl is the point. You want to get as close to that as possible. I'd rather get to that game and lose it 100 times out of 100.
Okay. We're on the same page with that. I would, it's Super Bowl. I'm not, it's like you lose the Super Bowl, and that sucks. But it's like if you run into a buzzsaw that is the Seattle Seahawks and they beat you, it just is what it is. And, and by the way, before anyone talks about this, and multiple people have talked about this, Kay Adams did a good job of mentioning this, and other people have mentioned it as well. If Drake May wins this game, he will be the first and only quarterback to beat 3 top 5 defenses in the playoffs. Cam Newton, it hasn't happened since Cam Newton in 2015. Cam Newton, of course, lost in the Super Bowl to Denver, but it hasn't even happened since then. You could talk about the opposing offenses and what the quarterbacks have done and blah, blah, blah. I don't care. That's an impressive run by an offense against defenses. And if they play against Seattle in the Super Bowl, you're talking about 4 playoff games against 4 of the top 5 defenses. So, we can say whatever we want about the other offense. When you talk about going up against monstrous defenses, great defenses, that's what they've done. That's all they've done in these playoffs. And You've passed the test twice. Again, only team this year to throw for 3 touchdowns against the Houston Texans. Kind of a big deal. Like that's not nothing, And so I believe it's the second time it's happened in the last 25 games or something like that. Like they don't give up a ton of passing touchdowns, and Drake May had 3. He didn't play a good game. By the way, one of those fumbles was on a completely busted play where Ramondre went the wrong way, the miscommunication, and May's just diving to get some yards, and the guy punches the ball out. Just a freak play. Probably should have tried to get those extra yardage, but that's just a freak play. That's not like a strip sack or something like that. It's just, it is what it is. And so
So you mentioned that Carolina team, famous for having an elite athlete quarterback and questionable receivers to throw to. Do you know who was the assistant general manager of that Panthers team?
Brandon Beane.
Oh,
God. Unbelievable, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, isn't it?
That's crazy.
Just repeating that team build.
Oh, God.
Yeah, that's crazy. And it's one. We'll end this with some Bills slander. Look at the weather forecast right now for Foxborough for Sunday.
Freaking Bills, man.
If the Bills, even with 5 turnovers, don't blow that game, where they really should have beaten Denver last weekend, we've got a Bills-Patriots AFC Championship game in a blizzard in Foxborough. That is incredible. That's what this whole thing's for right there. And we would have had 2 different divisional matchups in the conference championships. It would be incredible. So Bills really blew their end of that, which stinks. But maybe we do get a snowy game anyway.
Yeah. I'll tell you, as a guy who would have been going to that game, I would have been very excited to go. I would not have been very excited to go home after that, trying to get home on Route 1.
You might have to just get a hotel.
But I'll tell you, man, it is. I saw that tweet today and I was like, oh God, could you even imagine what that type of blizzard happening? Like, oh my God, it would have been unbelievable, but what are you going to do? So anyway, so that's it. That's all we got for you guys. Enjoy the game on Sunday. Remember, and we know this. Now we know this. We had Tom Brady for a long time, and we just kind of took it for granted, right? Until he was gone. Enjoy this game. Enjoy it. Okay? Know that we have a good young quarterback, and we have a coach that we all love, and we have a team that we believe in. Every team is different every year, and I believe that they'll be back here again, but there's no guarantee. So enjoy this game. Hopefully the Pats come out on top, and then we get 2 weeks to talk about the Super Bowl again, and it just, oh God, I can't wait. So let's see what happens. But Pats go out there and take care of business in Denver, and then we get to watch what happens in Santa Clara and stay the hell away from the power plant over there next to the stadium. So, but anyways, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We appreciate it. Thank you to the chat. You guys are great tonight. We really appreciate you guys tuning in and chopping it up with us. And we'll see you guys Sunday night, win or lose Sunday night, but really win for the love of God, win on Sunday. We'll see you Sunday night after the Patriots, hopefully, fingers crossed, advance to another Super Bowl if they can take down Denver, which, by the way, they never won in Denver before. So Drake May out here doing things Tom Brady never did. So be pretty nice. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Be good to each other and go Pats.